Thank you so much for inviting me, guys. I'm honored. All familiar faces. It's good. I've been in Dryden long enough to recognize almost everybody. I wrote a couple of things down with Carl's help because I wasn't sure what to touch on, how to start. I will basically tell my story in a very brief manner. In closing, I was racking my brain to think of a story that will be relevant and will define maybe a full circle of how my life came to be, going back to exactly the same point in time and space. And I found a story, luckily, because something happened in my life, brought me back to the same exact spot I started, but in a very, very different way after 15 years or so. And by accident, it all happened by accident. So hopefully that will be a good story to tell. My background, I'm going to start with that. Ethnically, I'm Palestinian. I was born to Palestinian parents in Kuwait. I was raised there until age 17, until the Iraqi-Kuwaiti war happened, in which I became a third-generation refugee. So my grandparents were refugees in 1948 when they escaped from Palestine, crossed the border to Jordan. And a second immigration, or they became refugees for the second time in 1967. And then we became refugees again in 1990, leaving Kuwait to going to Jordan. So I grew up in a very small apartment, 2 bedrooms, with there were 6 kids, 2 girls and 4 boys, and mom and dad and grandma. So that was a very tight place, but we all lived almost like that 40 years ago. Everyone we know, 10 kids, 11 kids, 3 kids. It was all a 2-bedroom apartment, and everybody shared everything, the dinner table, the books, the pens and pencils, and everything else. So we grew up very close. My mom, if you see her, you'll think she's never seen any suffering in her life. She's a very strong woman, and I think I take after her. Very determined and very graceful. She is incredible. She raised us with a lot of grace. She gave us a lot of strength, and she made us love each other a lot. And that helped in the future, because anytime one of us was going through a hard time, the other person would help. And that's how we all kind of became, did well in life, regardless of how hard things got at some point. Sorry, my voice is shaky just because I'm trying to reflect. I'm just nervous, I'm not sad. There's nothing to be sad about, really. So I dressed tonight in the Palestinian scarf. I'm sure it's familiar visually to people. It's just a Middle Eastern headscarf, basically, that became culturally recognized around the world. If Palestine is kind of hard to imagine, Jerusalem would be an easier way geographically of knowing where I come from. So 1992, I come to Canada. My sister had been here for 2 years already with her husband and my little nephew. He was 1.5 at the time. And after the war happened, the only person that could leave Jordan out of my entire family is me. Only the girl, and only the one that finished high school. So my sister helped me out. Her ex-husband looked for a suitable kind of education, something I can finish fast and get a job. And he thought of dental assisting at the time. And he knew I was good in school and I liked science, so that was easy, an easy pick. So I came as a student to Canada, and I stayed with my sister. 2 days after I arrived, very little English, I started dental assisting school, which was very hard. I got a lot of help from the school itself with language, help from students, from the counselor in school, and from the principal. So I finished in the year time and started looking for work. And then my sister and her husband helped me with my immigration papers. So that chapter ended. I started working as a dental assistant. 10 years into it, working with the same person, I decided that I wanted to go back and become a dental hygienist, because that's, you know, normal evolution kind of. So when I sat with my boss at the time and said I wanted to go back to school, so I may be working only part-time, he insisted that I don't go back to school to dental hygiene, and that I pursue dentistry instead. So, of course, being an immigrant, 10 years in Canada is not, in my mind, wasn't long enough for me to have enough maybe language skills or financial stability, and dental school is very long and very expensive. So he encouraged me a lot, and he's one of my guardian angels, and he said, no, I know you can do it. I believe in you. Just go and do it. And said, don't help me with this next patient. Just sit and make some phone calls. Call U of T, call York University, and see what the requirements are. So I called, and they asked me for a bunch of things that I didn't have. I had finished high school 10 years prior and in Kuwait, so they didn't recognize a lot of my courses. I studied in Kuwait in a public school, and the Kuwaiti system is based on basically any Middle Eastern school. It's a very rigorous, very strict school system. So there's a lot of discipline, there's uniforms, there's daily homework. Kids, I always tell my niece and nephew, you're spoiled. You have no idea how many books we carried to school, how hard things were. So I think the discipline that I got growing up with that education, mostly in Arabic, of course. So English was introduced for only 4 years, and very slightly. It was only one subject out of 8 subjects that we studied, and it was, now if I go back and read the books that we were taught, even in higher levels classes, they probably will be very, very, very basic English. And I used dictionaries, you know, and dictionaries today are easy because you have an iPad and an iPhone. 24 years ago, I had this massive big book, and each single word you have to look page per page. We didn't have the ease and the luxury, so it took me a lot of time to study and pass school. And a lot of people thought I had social issues because I wouldn't go out and visit anyone in the community when I came to Canada, because I had so much homework, and they couldn't believe how can someone study for 9 or 10 hours a day, but they didn't realize that I had to work that hard to pass school, because I wasn't understanding what I'm reading at the beginning. Still, even though I was in Canada for 10 years, but reading and producing, and I graduated, by the way, the 5th on a class of 100. And when you're speaking of the elite students that are chosen for dental school, that was a lot of work. I became an honorary member, like an invited member to an honor society, an honor dental society called AKU. So they pick students every year to become members of their community. And they picked me alongside 9 others from my class who they thought were the most achieving students. So it was a great honor. It's a lot of work, as you know. Anyone who has kids or who's gone through life knows that it's a lot of work. But like I said, it's determination, and I was lucky to have the chance to be determined, grow up with amazing family, no matter how hard the times got. And there are times when we became refugees and after. Before, we had a decent life. We were lower middle class. Money was always available. Dad always had a job. Mom worked from home as a dressmaker. So we always had money coming in. As a refugee, there are times in which there was mom and dad and 5 children, and we literally did not have $1 in the house to buy a loaf of bread. And this is a true story, and it happens to all the refugees, and maybe it happens in other societies where there's a poverty level that's low. Canada, here we have welfare, we have certain social assistance, so hopefully nobody goes through that. But you go through that, and I find that if you have strong family ties, if you've been raised properly, if you've been given strength, and strength is not always money, you will overcome obstacles. But still, dental school, even after 10 years of being in Canada and working as a dental assistant and dealing with patients all day, it was very hard to achieve academically, because the language I speak on daily basis, or the things I read on in a small newspaper, are very different than what you read in a scientific book, or to produce scientific literature and homework. It was very challenging. So I had to redo some courses in high school, in night school in Toronto, and then got into U of T, and then finished dentistry from U of T, and came to Sioux Lookout. So that was my first job as a dentist. Then after a year and a half, politics got a little bit too much. I was talking to Carl about that when we met, and then I wanted to go into private practice. So I found a job in Dryden. I applied for the job, came here, was here for 3.5 years before I bought my own office, and just life has been busy since. But everything is great. It's a great town, a great life for sure. Carl was asking me to maybe touch on the Syrian refugee committee that we created in Dryden, one of two. One is was formed by the Catholic Church members, and me and a bunch of friends formed the Dryden Syrian Refugee Committee, and we have a family that we sponsored who are also refugees, but left Syria to go to Iraq. They've been there in a refugee camp for 4 years. Things moved this month really nicely. They had 3 phone interviews and 1 interview in person. And the details about the interview was that there was a Canadian person that did not speak the Arabic language. There was a translator, so somebody obviously sent maybe from Canada, I would assume. They were interviewed, a lot of information were taken from them, and they were advised that in 3 to 4 months they will receive instructions about where to do the medical exam. And after that, maybe it's another 6 months. So it's taking a long time. As a refugee myself, I was maybe lucky and privileged not to ever have to live in a refugee camp in a tent. A refugee camp by the sense of being in a refugee camp, because we moved from one apartment to another. So I never had to live that harsh of a life as a refugee. I was one of the fortunate ones. And then coming to Canada, of course, that was beyond being lucky, because 99.9% of the refugees that almost leave any country in the world wish to come to North America or Eastern or Western Europe. So I was one of the very lucky people, and not very many made it to North America and had the opportunities I had. So to conclude, I'm going to tell a little story about how ironic life can be sometimes, and to also say that coming to Canada, sky's the limit in terms of opportunity, and I mean that in every way, and the story will tell that very clearly. There is, regardless of how much improvement we would like to make to our society, we are pretty much up there with recognizing human rights, recognizing what's wrong, recognizing what's polite, personal space. We are well aware of these things, but most of all, if someone, any one of us, born in Canada or born outside, if you have a dream and you're determined and you're hardworking, there's no limit. You can reach any lifestyle that you like. You can achieve anything, absolutely anything you want. I believe that because it happened in my life, and it happens in people's lives that I look at coming from different backgrounds. And this is the opportunity we have in Canada or North America in general that a lot of people in the world may not have access to. So the story I was maybe a month or two in Canada, and I was still in dental school at the time. So in dental school, they take us to a trip to, in dental assisting school, they take us to a trip downtown to Toronto to visit dental school, U of T dental school. So on that day, I was taken with the rest of the students on a bus to downtown Toronto. And we were, touring the dental school, and at the time, it was way beyond even dreaming about being ever a student in that school. So we visited, they showed us where the chairs and the clinics are, how the school runs. And then I got lost in the school. So I missed my bus to go back to Mississauga, and I was trapped. I was in this dental school, it's huge, there was no one there. I found my way out, and I sat in the entrance of the dental school outside, outdoors. There still exist, the huge cement stairs right in the front of the dental school. They're almost as wide as the building, and there's maybe 2 or 3. And then there's a small street, and across the street there's a small plaza where there's a drugstore store. They sell sandwiches there. So I got out, I realized I missed my bus, and then I sat on the cement stairs, and I looked across the street, and I realized that it's a restaurant, so I can go in and ask for a lunch or something. So I thought, okay, I'm lost. I didn't know what to do, who to call. My sister, of course, is the only person, but I didn't know how to use a payphone. So I stopped a guy in the street, and I tried with my very broken English to explain to him that this is the phone number on this paper. I'm lost. So he helped me out. I don't know if he asked me for a quarter, if he put in a quarter in the payphone. He made the call for me, explained to my sister where I was, and then handed me the phone. I said, you have to come to this address. I missed the bus. She said, okay, we'll be there as fast as we can. It may take an hour, 2, 3, I don't know. So I sat and waited, and while waiting, I was looking at this restaurant, and completely lost. I maybe had $4, $5, I can't remember how much money I had in my pocket, but very, very little, I'm sure. So I walked across the street, and entered the restaurant. It was, you can imagine Toronto, lunchtime, 50 people lined up in front of me, 50 behind me, and I could not ask for a sandwich because I didn't know what I was reading. I didn't know what the ingredients were, how the system works. So the girl got very frustrated with me, and she said, oh my God, like something, get out. I could understand some things, but not everything. So finally, I could not order the sandwich. I'm holding up the line. So I felt really bad, left the restaurant, could not ask for lunch, and I didn't want to take a chance to go to another restaurant. So I sat across the street for maybe an hour and a half to 2 until my sister came and picked me up. It was not pretty because it was like March, it was really cold. So in any case, that day left, and my sister came, picked me up, everything was safe and good, and they still laugh about how I got lost, and when my sister came to pick me up, I had buttoned my jacket, and there was one long end and one short end because I didn't button the right buttons together. So she still laughs. It's like, you were not that scared to button your jacket. So anyway, that day completely left out of my memory. And one day in 3rd year dental school, I'm sitting with my best friend, Tarun Bablani. He was a dentist also in this town for 2 years. So I'm sitting out, we're just eating lunch outside dental school, and of course complaining about the professors and the system. And we went to Druxy's, came back, and I had been to Druxy's probably between 1st and 3rd year of dental school, maybe 100 times. Never thought of that incident, ever. I'm sitting there with him, 3rd year dental school eating, and I looked across, and it's a flashback to the day I sat across when I could not ask for the sandwich. So I sat there and I said, Tarun, you won't believe what I'm about to tell you. He said, what? I said, I want to cry. This is unbelievable. How could I not ever have remembered this incident? For 3 years I sat on these stairs. And he said, what's happening? So I told my friend the story of how the first time I ever saw that store was during the time in which I wasn't speaking English, didn't have any money, had very little experience in life in general. I was 18. Couldn't ask for the sandwich, was kicked out of the store. And 15 years later, I was sitting on exactly the same stairs, you know, with full security, a great education, more money in my pocket, lots of family support, and complaining about the weather and the professors. Completely different life and completely different status mentally, socially, and in every way. So he looked at me, he said, Ghada, you should write a book. So in Canada, anything is possible, and because people are allowed to dream and achieve, and everything is open and possible.